All right, I've clicked the stream. The stream is here. We're back with March Madness playbook from Portfolio Kings. I'm Zach. We have Brett. I'm assuming this is live. I'm going to check the stream over here real quick to kind of see where we're at. Let's do a little refresh, and we'll get to East Region. There he goes. Looks like we're live. Mr. Brett. Welcome back, everybody, if you're tuning in, or if you tune in later. We're going to cut straight to the East Region. Give me uno momento. Here we go. I like it. East Region, we got Michigan at the top. We got Alabama at the bottom. We got Texas, number 3. We got, who's number 4? Florida State. 5, Colorado. We got 7, UConn. 6, BYU. 8, LSU. Man, Brett, I got to say, to start out, the East Region, I think might be the toughest region. Just going to throw that out there.
It's definitely the toughest because a team that you didn't mention also UConn.
I like UConn.
And yeah, I mean, and obviously you have these teams that are getting hot here near the end of the season that have size, that have 3-point shooters, and I'm speaking of Georgetown. And then you have teams that are a little bit cold like Colorado, but who have, a senior leader and, have the right talent to move through the bracket. If, they can turn the ship around, like they have the talent. And then you have LSU, who is probably one of the most explosive offenses in the entire tournament. So if you want to think about like a proxy to past years, you can think of a team like Auburn, a team that didn't have a great defense, but man, can they light it up? And if they can get hot just game after game after game, LSU can shred through this bracket. Just because they have that much offensive firepower. The thing is their defense just is really miserable, and they are sloppy. So they definitely have some weaknesses there, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're an 8 seed. Not a lot of people picking them. And then you also have Michigan State, again, super hot. The only team to beat 3 top 5 teams. And again, that's assuming Michigan State's going to beat UCLA. Which I think that they will. Texas, super hot. Maryland, they can get hot. Then also, you even have Iona, coached by Rick Pitino, so obviously very well coached. St. Bonnie's, the more I read about them, I haven't watched them yet. I definitely want to do so over the next 24, 48 hours. But I've heard that they're sneaky tough. That spread versus that LSU game is much lower than I think many people would have originally thought. And then, of course, Florida State, which probably is one of the deepest, most talented teams in the whole bracket as well, with awesome size, awesome athleticism. They have a lottery pick player on the team. Again, their biggest weakness is just turnovers, sloppiness, just lack of mentality, a lack of resilience. And that really just has been their downfall. But it's definitely not a lack of talent or size or athleticism. That they're rich with all those attributes.
I like it.
I didn't even mention BYU.
And I like BYU. Again, it's really, this bracket is not fair. Literally from 1 to 10, if any of them made the Final Four, I would not be. That's how, and maybe even 11, maybe even 12. If they ran the table, got to the Final Four, I wouldn't be shocked. It's how competitive it seems like this bracket side is. Whereas, last night's, Gonzaga, Iowa, maybe a couple tests, but really one test, and they're probably through to the Elite 8.
Absolutely. The West that we were talking about the other night, again, Gonzaga earned the number 1 seed, and their reward is essentially the weakest region. I think they are pretty much set to get to the Elite 8 or the Final Four rather effortlessly. Again, I think their biggest test, like I mentioned yesterday, is probably going to be in the second round if they play Oklahoma. If they get Mizzou, then they'll just smoke Mizzou. And again, they're more than likely going to beat Oklahoma as well. But again, like I mentioned yesterday, just to quickly summarize that I feel like Oklahoma, if they have a good game, Gonzaga has an average game or a slightly sloppy game, which they can be prone to do, that Oklahoma has the firepower to capitalize on that vulnerability. But if they get past that, then I think it's pretty much smooth sailing all the way to the Final Four.
Yeah, that's a good call. So let's kick it off. Let's just kind of touch on each team. We won't be as long as we were last night. And FYI, tomorrow night we're going to do both the last remaining brackets together. So that way, Thursday we can focus kind of more on our sportfolios, more or less. And we'll probably do a stream kind of gearing up to release a little cheat sheet of what plays we might be looking to do come Friday. And obviously even games Thursday, but stream might be after those games. So just look out for that tomorrow. But tonight, Michigan, kind of top load. What are we seeing as far as, I know Michigan's had a lot of great wins this season. They've really kind of surprised people coming out of that COVID issue, just kind of picking right back up and just dominating the competition. But Michigan lost a key player recently, I believe. Isn't that correct?
Oh, absolutely. So losing Isaiah Livers, who, in my opinion, is their best player, even more important to the team than Franz Wagner. He's a massive loss, and it's uncertain when he is going to come back, if ever. He might not come back. So, I mean, he's got foot issues, and this is the type of injury I was reading up on as well, is that even if he comes back, I mean, he's not going to be 100%. And it's those foot issues that they can really be bothersome and just affect your overall rhythm and your shooting ability, your balance. So no matter what, this team is going to be less than 100% throughout the course of this tournament. No matter how good you are, losing one of your best players, one of your senior leaders with a lot of veteran experience, scoring capacity, height, defensive game, it's hard to recover from that. So I think Michigan is definitely significantly hampered by that loss. I think it's flying under the radar.
That's a good point, especially so late in the season. I mean, there's no time for adjustment. Whereas, in Florida, for instance, lost Keontae, I can't remember his full name. What's his name?
Yeah, Keontae Davis.
Davis.
Or Keontae Johnson.
Johnson, yeah. The Gators have had the whole season to adjust. So whether you like the Gators or not, that team is now that team without Keontae. Michigan hasn't had an opportunity to really function without one of their best players. So, I mean, that has to be a negative through the rest of the tournament.
The other thing about Michigan too is with Franz Wagner. I mean, I know you really like him, Zach, and and he's had some good games here down the stretch. The thing is he has some blatant duds of a game. So that is in his DNA to have a dud of a game where he's going to go 1 of 9, 1 of 10. And then kind of gets hesitant around taking open shots when he's having a bad game. He's not super resilient when he's having a bad game. So I think Michigan is super vulnerable. You could also make the case, that they've all these Big Ten teams have kind of been through the gauntlet, kind of the opposite effect of Gonzaga, kind of constantly playing, high pressure games, tough competition, kind of every other night for the last couple of weeks. And they could be fatigued. And then to your point, now they've only had one game to adjust without having Isaiah Livers to fall back on and to help rally the troops and to be that defensive force. So I think that they have major issues here. Now, again, they're super well coached. They still have a great bench. Chandre Brown, who is going to take Isaiah Livers' place. He is potent from an offensive perspective. He can shoot the 3 actually better than Isaiah Livers. Again, by no means a full replacement, but he's not a chump either. So this team still has a full set of weaponry to really continue to be effective throughout the course of this tournament. But they just are not the same Michigan from a week ago when people were actually considering, are they the best team? Now I just think they got a chink in the armor. And if a team can kind of slice them right in that chink, dead.
Interesting. That's a good point.
And they might have to face LSU in the second round. Now, I think Michigan can still probably beat them again,
Yeah,
just
even so.
because Michigan is well disciplined, well coached. Don't shoot themselves in the foot as much as LSU can. But again, as I mentioned, if LSU can pull off an Auburn type experience, like there's no doubt if you're putting in 10 brackets, you got to have LSU going deep in one. Maybe even going or winning the championship because they have that type of offense to do that. Now, at the same time, they could
To
lose in
win
the
the
first round.
championship. Oh,
Yes, to
that's.
win the championship.
But teams like LSU, it's very difficult for them to win 6 games, which should all be basically competitive. So it's not like they have 3 easy games. They're in the toughest region. Like they're going to have to beat Michigan. They're going to have to beat, you know, I don't know, BYU. They're going to have to beat Alabama. They'll beat the Zags. Like there's a lot of like best win of the season type games potentially for LSU. So I mean, I think to your point, can LSU win their region? Sure. I mean, winning the championship, I feel like that's such a stretch. Maybe the championship game, but I mean, winning the championship. I mean, again, like you have to beat good teams through 6 games. That's just a tough thing for any team to do.
Yeah, well, I definitely wouldn't have thought that Auburn could do it based on their kind of strength weakness profile from a couple of years ago, because there was again they lived and died by the three. So I mean, if they're off, boom, they're done.
Yeah,
And
but
their
they were
defense
also
wasn't great.
electrically athletic and a very
So is this LSU team. This LSU team is
yeah.
far more athletic than that Auburn team. That Auburn team did
Oh,
not have the same type of height, especially that
yeah, yeah,
LSU
yeah,
has.
yeah.
LSU also, and also that Auburn team, I think they had, I can't remember his name now, but they had an NBA player. But remember, he actually got hurt
Hmm,
and
that's right.
didn't play in the tournament. But for LSU, I mean, they have uh, 2 NBA players. So Cam Thomas and Trendon Watford. Trendon Watford was very highly touted last year as a freshman. Started off a little bit slow, kind of lost a little bit of the luster that was kind of around his reputation because he didn't have a great freshman year.
Hmm.
But he started off a little bit slow this year as well, but he's really start to come around here at the end of the season. And then Cam Thomas is also like an elite freshman. And then they also are well insulated with also experience with Javante Smart, Darius Days. They've been on the team for the last couple of years. So I think there is a lot to like about this team. Again, especially if they can get hot, and they are well coached.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
So I think, I mean, again, they're a highly volatile team, so that's why they can lose this very first game, or I think they can get hot and streak through this bracket,
Okay.
through this region.
Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's just touch on real quick. Michigan, I want to point out, I mean, they have 15 unders this season and only 9 overs. I think there's a perception, and looking through these trend sheets in general, I think the Big Ten has this perception that like, oh, it's high scoring because like Iowa scores a lot of points, but
Mm-hmm.
like the more I'm seeing it, there's a lot of like under trends. I believe we'll have to double check all of them, but Michigan. I mean, that's a surmountable under lean by a
Yes.
team. And if
Yes, and
you,
I think because a lot of their high profile games have been those barn burners, like that Ohio State game where they both went into like the 90s.
yeah, but that was like, I mean, that's
And so I
literally
think,
like an outlier. I mean, that's like
yeah,
their
exactly. But
one.
those are like the name brand games that
Yeah.
resonate mostly with most bettors.
Well, what's interesting is besides those, like they have 2 outliers from the total delta versus. Let me zoom in here for people
Good point.
watching. Um, is I find it interesting that if you take those 2 outliers away, you know, there's, I mean, what, 2 to 1, 3 to 1 more unders that are beyond the 10, 20 point range of the total line
Mm-hmm.
compared to the over. So, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
basically to say, if you're betting the game live and, the total bumps up 10, 12, 15 points, like you want to take the under. I mean, there's so much room for that under to hit or even to come up a little short and you still get it that
Yeah.
unless it's an outlier game. I mean, if they play LSU, that's a team that I mean, that could be an Ohio State barn burner. But besides LSU in this region, I think if Michigan, goes far, finding opportunities to take some unders, I think, could definitely be plus EV, as they say.
Yeah, no, especially the thing is, I don't necessarily know maybe about this first matchup we'll see here. Again, no, Isaiah Livers does kind of change the overall kind of calculus of this offense, but we see that when they've played inferior opponents, they actually do kind of trend over. So you can basically look and see, like, say they play a bottom 50 team. It's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, and 2 to the over. Although, I mean, again, it is still kind of hugging that red line. So to your point, if you can get 10 points of value live, that seems like a sweet spot. So if the total is going to be 145 to open, it moves to 155. You hit that under 155, you're going to put yourself in a very good position, at least based on a historical precedent, based on this chart. And to your point, when the team has played a top 50 team, you can just see all those dots below the red line, which again is just, those are just all unders. It's essentially saying that when Michigan plays a good team, it goes under.
And even if it goes over, it's, besides the one outlier Ohio State game, it's 10-ish points.
Close to that 10. Yeah.
It's not too far out of reach. And with the volatility of live lines, typically, these lines can move quick and fast. So you can definitely probably find opportunities that give you a really good price. Great. I think we can move on, since we've talked a lot about Michigan, and I like our macro. Basically, I think it's going to be a macro fade of Michigan in this region. I don't think there's a lot of reason to put a lot of emphasis behind them.
No, absolutely not. Because this, again, like we've talked a little bit about now ad nauseum, that this seems to be the toughest region, and now you have a weakened Michigan team in the toughest region, and everyone's still buying Michigan. Time to fade that trade.
Yeah, I agree. So anything on Mount St. Mary's, Texas Southern? I did a little research on Mount St. Mary's earlier in the week. I'll have to dig that up to see if we want to do any action on Thursday. But I believe, I'm trying to see from memory, their offense is really poor. They're ranked dead last in offensive rank in our aggressiveness stat.
No, yeah, both these teams look miserable. I mean, I'm looking at Texas Southern from an offensive and defensive aggressiveness perspective, near dead last.
Yeah.
Comeback potential, actually dead last. The only strength that they have is they got a lot of experience, and they're big. So they're a taller team, and they got good experience. But they got a lot of good experience being bad. So I'm probably barely going to watch this game. I don't think there's probably going to be a ton to learn.
Yeah, I think you'd get more value out of rewatching old tape or doing some more research on some teams that you're going to get more than more or less.
Yeah, so and also we're looking at that Texas Southern strength of schedule, almost dead last, ranked 341st.
Yeah, so they've played nobody.
So I mean, they have not played anybody. Not tested at all, and even of the games that they have played, I mean, they haven't even played that well. So
I think it's fine to move on. This region stacks. So let's get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
LSU, like we talked about, so you're pretty high on LSU as far as upside. Obviously, their first game's St. Bonnie, who's tough as nails, as they might say. I mean, only 4 losses, 16-4. I think they've had some pretty signature wins this year as well, competitive games.
But I think, when we look at LSU's team page, we can kind of see in the data and quantify a lot of the things that I was just talking about from a qualitative perspective. So we can see, look at the aggressiveness, the offensive aggressiveness, one of the best in the field, and the defensive aggressiveness, literally one of the worst in the field. And that's the type of volatility you're going to be dealing with. But look at the comeback potential. They have one of the best profiles to drive a comeback because, again, they have such a potent offense. So they're good at free throws. They're good at 3-pointers. In fact, the only weakness I see here maybe is they don't take enough 3-pointers, especially given the talent that they have. But they pass the ball well. They have excellent offensive rebounding. Those are definitely some of those strengths there. But we can see that here that they're quite poor at defensive rebound, and again, that comes into the discipline. How well are you positioned? And so definitely weak there. And that kind of, and also they lack some of the experience, and part of the reason goes because two of their best players are a freshman and a sophomore. But again, they still have the senior, the kind of like veteran leadership kind of around the edges as well that play meaningful minutes. So I'm not too worried about that. But I think I kind of said all that I need to say kind of about LSU, and I think it's kind of all here, kind of available in the data as well.
Yeah, I just want to take a quick gander at the chart sheet just to see if there's anything on the totals that looks interesting. It looks pretty. Seems like there's obviously, to the volatility side, there's more volatility to the overs, as in if it's heading over, you're more likely to get it to go way over.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of it's kind of a little bit all over the place. Yeah. I mean, there seems to be more volatility to the upside. I mean, and that makes sense. I mean, every single thing that I've said, does it sound like they're an attractive team to bet the under on? No. So when it does go under, it looks like it basically doesn't go
actually,
under
I mean,
very much.
See, this is actually, there is a baseline of about 10 to 15 points that if it dipped, if there was a lull in the game, if you're live trading the game, taking it over, if you could get to that 10-15 mark under the closing total, seems
exactly what you just said, again, is quantified on this page, is basically what that number is that you're trying to look for. Like, well, what's the range that I can feel comfortable, like really kind of leaning into betting this team's over? Well, it's plus or minus what number? The volatility, the standard deviation of the expected total at the bottom right there. You said 10 to 15. Well, it's 13. So it's exactly that number. And so you can replicate this approach to all of these teams. So you can just skip through page after page after page, look at teams' volatility, again, the standard deviation of their expected totals to understand, what's the wiggle room that I can feel comfortable now leaning into this team. So again, if you get that 13 points of value from the total, again, up or down, doesn't matter. Up or down. If you can get 13 points of value, you're going to be sitting pretty. Essentially, you're betting on an outcome that is going to be within the 70% of outcomes. 70% of outcomes when you're betting
minus 110. Yeah, that's good.
That's plus EV.
You can't beat that the long term if you can do that. That's as good as it's going to ever get.
And that's the advantage of betting live.
Yes, if you have and that's one key. We'll talk more about this in the off season as we gear up for NFL. Just to touch on really quickly, is the advantages and obviously the difficulties with betting live trading. It's kind of like day trading, stocks type mentality. But there's a way to do it. It's all ultimately about strategy. It's all about having a game plan and not emotion. Just knowing what you're looking for. Like if you strategized all season to bet Kansas City Chiefs down during the NFL season, you would have lost the Super Bowl, but you would have won 9 or 10 other games, right? So if you hold true to the strategy of what you're looking to do, typically you can trade pretty well live. But St. Bonnie's, let's get to them to see. The line's pretty close. I think it's -1 or it's even right now. St. Bonnie's is tough from what I've read, what I've heard so far.
Oh yeah, I definitely need to watch some tape on them for sure, just to get a visualization, because I mean this is a super tight spread. I mean, I think what was it? It was like 1 or 2 points. I haven't looked at it.
Tough.
Today.
They have a top 5 defensive rank in aggressiveness, and interestingly, 85% of their scoring returns. I mean, that's a seasoned team. I mean, I don't know. I like that.
Yeah.
Especially like you said.
The thing is what I'm not super worried about is because See, what I'm worried about with LSU is LSU being sloppy and the other team being offensively aggressive and basically creating a sort of separation that even LSU can't really overcome. Which I don't really know what that is, because again, like if LSU is down 15, I want to bet LSU.
That's a good point.
Because again, they have that great comeback potential. But I'm not worried about tough defensive teams versus LSU. I'm worried more so about tough offensive teams.
Yeah, teams that'll put up 90.
Yeah, exactly. Or a team that's just, very well disciplined, well coached, has a lot of experience, and is just, not going to make mistakes. So actually, let's look at the mistakes. Let's see here.
Turnovers,
what kind of mistakes?
Not much. 11
turnovers. Okay, so yeah, they don't turn the ball over too much.
Decent assist possession rate. Slow pace.
Tempo. This is interesting. Yes, very slow pace. So this is really going to be kind of two opposites, kind of coming at one another. And so I'm not seeing why the spread should be so tight.
I think it's you think really LSU should be favored by more? It does seem like if St. Bonnie's is going to win, let's talk about game script real quick. It's kind of something that we're kind of really strong on is, if LSU's going to win this game, like from beginning to end, they're gonna kind of run away with the game versus St. Bonnie's. If St. Bonnie's is going to pull the, I guess, upset more or less, it's going to be on the back of them keeping it a tight game, slow pace, LSU out of rhythm. So you're going to get a low total in that version. St. Bonnie's isn't going to outscore LSU. If anything, St. Bonnie's is stifling LSU's offense, or LSU's just missing shots.
Mm-hmm.
And LSU has to come back to pull it out or come up short. If St. Bonnie's is going to win, I feel like that's the game script. If LSU is going to win outright, I mean, they're going to pull away and win by maybe 10, 15, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like those are the two outcomes.
Well, and that's the other thing I do want to mention about LSU as well is again, if LSU is up by 15, I want to bet on the other team because they're just not good at holding leads. They're just, again, they play a lot of close games.
This sounds like it sounds like this game might be really good to live bet both sides.
Yes,
is
absolutely.
What it sounds like. I mean, as far as
especially if St. Bonnie's defense can stifle LSU early on, and LSU is a little bit cold, and St. Bonnie's can be up 15-5. That seems like a great spot. Or even if St. Bonnie's slows the game down to an extent that the total drops meaningfully. So let's see, what's St. Bonnie's standard deviation on their total? So it's 14, and what LSU's was 13.
Yeah.
So again, if you can get that 10 to 15 range of value, especially, we're looking I think I'm looking one way here, though, and that's it dropping lower so you can bet the over. Yeah. I think there's too much liability to bet the under.
And you should actually, and even taking a first half under, because, in all likelihood, these teams haven't played in a while. They're probably cold. They don't know each other from Adam. St. Bonnie's wants to slow the pace down. It's to their benefit to do that. So if there's any time that you're going to have a drought, it's probably in the first 5 to 15 minutes. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there's no point, if you want the under, there's no point in taking it early. Literally just wait, and you'll probably get at least 5, 7, 10, 15 points of value, and then take the over.
But like I said, I definitely want to get some game tape under my belt, watching St. Bonnie's for sure, just to get a better feel.
Cool. Well, let's go to Colorado before we get to Georgetown. So I've heard some market back and forth between, Colorado laid an egg versus Oregon State, but I think they won 8 games in a row before that championship game. So there seems to be this overreaction that Colorado sucks. It was one game in a championship. They won 8 before that. Might they have just run out of gas
Mm-hmm.
or ran into a team that just matched up with them well that day? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. What's your thoughts on Colorado? I know you were a little bearish
Yeah.
in
Well,
general.
I mean, I think it also speaks to just, I think the general perception that the Pac-12 is pretty weak.
Sucks, yeah.
Uh, yeah, to put it, yeah, more blatantly. Um, so I think that's also feeding into this. Um, I didn't see a lot to like from Colorado. I mean, the thing is, especially in that Oregon State game, so Colorado was on the verge of breaking the single season record for the best free throw percentage ever. So
Mm.
they were gonna shoot 83% as a
Mm.
team. And so this is obviously a very good free throw shooting team. They shot 15, 16 free throws versus Oregon, shot 50%.
Oof. So they
Uh,
collapsed in the pivotal.
yeah, exactly. So it was literally it was the last game of the season on the verge of breaking the record. They choke, literally have one of their worst free throw shooting games ever, and then it affects the outcome of the game.
Interesting.
So they lose because of a weakness in their most powerful
Well,
strength.
and real quick to touch on that is the reason I think that happens to teams in a given situation, time of year like this, is they don't believe in their own greatness. Like Tom Brady, right? Like perfect example, the GOAT of football. What does he do? He throws the Super Bowl trophy over the Tampa Bay, literal bay, drunk to his backup third string tight end, mind you, with utter confidence that he will throw it right, something he's never thrown, and the guy will catch it, and he did. That
Mm-hmm.
that takes a level of conviction and balls that Tom Brady can throw it. Like and anyone could do it to an extent, but the only way you're even going to get accomplishing it is with confidence. And so to me, that free throw ineptitude in a pivotal game in a pivotal moment tells me something about Colorado's psychology, and they are kids, but they don't buy the hype that they are good enough to hit 83%. Like Michael Jordan takes the game-winning shot with his eyes closed. He's gonna make it. Like because he has to go into it believing he's the best in order to be the best. Colorado doesn't buy that they're that good. They don't buy that they're going to break records. They don't buy that they're going to win a championship. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a level of psychology to this, and obviously they're kids, but if this was a program like North Carolina or something else, like does that kind of record really get to them? No, because they're there to win championships, like national championships, not like oh the Pac-12, like oh my God, I got scared because we might have won and broke records. Like,
Mm-hmm.
come on, guys. So to your point, it just makes me think Colorado might have some mental weakness built into the fabric of the players and the coaching staff and the team. Like, oh, we're here to be decent and play basketball. Like, we're not here to really win championships. Um, so maybe that's an exhibit of that mentality. But anything in the charts,
Well, then you
Chad?
have the exact opposite now
Mm-hmm.
in Georgetown, a
Yeah,
team with
that's a good point.
tons of confidence. Uh, Patrick Ewing winning obviously the Big East championship in Madison Square Garden. I mean, they're all riding high. I mean, they're all playing with house money too. I mean, they had no
Mm-hmm.
business making the tournament. And we've seen, those types of teams that play super loose, super relaxed, got nothing to lose, can play some good basketball, especially early in the tournament. And one of the things that we were talking about yesterday is, remember, a lot of these teams are 10 games short on the types
Yeah.
of season that the types of total games that they would be playing in a traditional season. And in those final 10 games is when teams can actually start to really become who they are, in that final stretch of the season. And so that may just be happening to some of these teams. So some of these teams may just now start to becoming who they are. And these are the beginning of new trends. So that's why you don't want to be quick to just write off Georgetown because they hadn't had a great record over the course of the season. I mean, again, they should have played another 10 games. I mean, what if they went 9-1? Well, then they're an easy, tournament team.
They're a 7 seed.
Yeah.
To your point. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And I like that they're playing with house money. I like that angle. And on top of it, I mean, it's a fairly young team. They only had 37% of returning scorers. So, Patrick Ewing's the head coach. Like, they gotta get themselves situated. And remember, something to remember in general is, like you said, you brought up last night. If the season started today and we played 30, 40 games, who are the best teams at the end of that season? Because a lot of these teams, to varying degrees, they weren't ready for the season start. We didn't even know if basketball was going to pick back up, conferences were going to pick back up. Like, so who's to say with a bunch of new talent, only 38% returning minutes, he's got, 75% of the team almost he's got to replace. So maybe they started bad, didn't get themselves situated until later in the season.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing, what I'm seeing here in the data as well is Colorado is a great defensive team, and it looks here that Georgetown turns the ball over quite a lot. So on average, 2 times more than average than just an average team. So the 150th ranked team. So definitely turnovers are a concern, and that's one of the things we actually have, highlighted here as one of their weaknesses, in addition to the inexperience, as you mentioned. So that's definitely something, to look kind of like to keep in your notes around when watching this matchup, is specifically how is Colorado's defense affecting Georgetown's offense. If Georgetown can kind of start to score, and doesn't seem like the Colorado defense is affecting them too much, then that seems like a buy sign, pretty early on, for Georgetown. And maybe this team, is for real. They're getting hot at the right moment, and they might be able to win a few games.
Yeah, I dig that.
Also, again, like a very good 3-point shooting team, whereas Colorado doesn't take that many threes and doesn't have a lot of sharp shooters. So there's definitely some edge there as well.
Anything we picked up on the signal dashboard as far as charts goes, Georgetown has 16 wins ATS, 9 ATS losses. So they've been underrated all year. They just haven't quite squeaked out wins. You would think typically if you have 16 ATS wins, like this must be a pretty good team, But obviously they've been some big underdogs, but they've covered those. So if I'm looking in let me zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just looking at another alternative stat here that we have in one of the new versions of the playbook that's uploaded to the drive, and that's looking at different factors for each one of these teams. So looking at the depth, looking at the distribution of scoring, looking at the number of sharpshooters, both from a free throw and a 3-point percentage. And so Georgetown's got 5 players that shoot better than 35% from 3. So that makes them dangerous, especially if they're going to be hot. And Colorado's not the type of team that if you put them in a hole, it can easily dig themselves out, because they don't have a lot of kind of peer scorers. So that's definitely something to keep in consideration as well.
Interesting. And one thing I'm picking up on in the totals for Georgetown is when the totals are between 140 and 150, thereabout for the closing total line, it seems to dip heavily under in that range. So I'm wondering, do we know what the line is currently? Gonna check this really quick.
No, yeah, exactly. If it's between 140 and 150, you're in the sweet spot.
Yeah, let me see if I can
I would say
see
140
it.
to 145 actually is like super sweet spot.
Let's see. I believe this game is Thursday.
Friday.
Is it Friday?
Well, it's definitely not Thursday, since those are just the playing games.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't found it, but have this up better next time. Oh well. For now,
What are you looking for?
it's Colorado's total line chart I have over here.
Hmm.
I'll have to look at it later. But yeah, if you get a nice Georgetown total between 140 and 150, obviously compared to Colorado, but it seems like an under. If Colorado's got a good defense, I mean, it makes complete sense. If the number's a little high, that and even in the range of outcomes, I mean, Georgetown doesn't
So
live.
it's 137.
I like that. I mean, especially live. Like if this bounces to like 147 or like around that range, even the under sounds great. I mean, that's. I mean, I doubt we're going to get it that high because both these teams sound like kind of plunky defensive type teams.
Well, again, one of the ways that you can get that is if Georgetown's going to hit a couple
Early threes, get
three,
going.
three.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, definitely hit the under. I don't think this is going to go over by any big margin.
No, yeah, this seems like a nice sweet spot that, yeah, if you can get, 5 to 6 points to the over and then bet that under.
Yeah.
So if you can get that one, again, that especially from the Georgetown perspective, you can get the 140 to 145 in that range. That seems like a nice sweet spot. So if you can hit that, definitely looks attractive.
Yeah, for sure. So next up, we got FSU. Let's just see some macro. So I really liked FSU 2.5 weeks ago. I would have put them as like a 1 or 2 seed. Now they're a 4 seed. I mean, you know a little bit more about them as far as, qualitative viewing of them. Is there anything that sticks out as to why they can't win this region or why maybe they just might? I feel like the market has forgot they existed, which makes me like them in this region.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they have a lot of upside. I mean, like I was saying earlier, this is one of the deepest teams in the tournament.
Offensive rebounding percentage, dear God, 35% to 26% NCAA average. I mean, that's demonstrative.
Yeah, and the thing is, when I talk about them being deep, I mean pretty much all these players can score. And
they're tall.
I mean, they got Raquan Gray is like, he's not nearly as good as Zion Williamson, but he's got the same frame as Zion Williamson, just not as explosive. He can be dominant. And then Scotty Barnes is a lottery pick player. MJ Walker, their leading scorer. I mean, he's the guy who you want the ball in his hands near the end of the game. The thing is man, this team just lacks discipline.
Always the case, man. Always the case with FSU.
Yeah, and that goes to. I mean, they have good coaching, but the discipline is just always a factor, kind of just year in and year out, and so that obviously goes to speak towards him.
Like if this was change FSU and put this talent in North Carolina, you would think it would be the number 1 overall seed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you would. I mean, would assume.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of like griping around like Leonard Hamilton should be in the head coaching Hall of Fame, etc. But I mean, the thing is he always has a lot of really great talent, and they don't ever really go too far. And so, that is somewhat of an indictment on him. And so, and this is kind of like that same team. They got like 8, 9 dudes who can all score 10 points a game. They got 2, really, big dudes. Kopra Vakiva is one of their big centers. He's really nimble. He can move really well. He can be a very potent scorer. Can do that kind of traditional hook shot as well. They got the size, they got the athleticism. They literally have everything that you could possibly, love about this type of team. But then, like a great example is they played versus Georgia Tech in the championship. And they turned the ball over 15 times in the first half.
Ooh.
This team was turning the ball over every other
possession.
play. Yeah. In fact, they were shooting 50% from the field, and they were losing because they literally did not get the opportunity to shoot shots. And then you'd think you'd have some sort of like
regrouping,
halftime regrouping, and they turned the ball over another 14 times in the second half.
So 29 turnovers.
Yeah, I think it was 28 turnovers for
What?
the game.
That's insane. That's like just a general insanity. I don't even know how you can do that.
Like, and again, like they were meeting. It wasn't just Florida State. Georgia Tech has a great defense.
Yeah.
And also a team that looks and targets you to pick your pocket. But the thing is they just fed right into it.
Well, that's I think then what we're hitting on is a kryptonite to FSU is going to be a team that can take advantage of their inability to, keep the ball, basically.
Yeah.
So I think
but it's not just turnovers. This really is a broader macro theme of lack of discipline. Yeah. So there's key players that also get in foul trouble and then are either out of the game or have to sit. And, again, they're deep, so they can overcome that. And that's one of the reasons why they can still be a good team. But they constantly have players who are in foul trouble. Like MJ Walker can foul out with 5 minutes left. And the dude's a point guard. Like, it's just.
Yeah, that's baffling.
Yeah. And then also Scotty Barnes, again, he is going to be a lottery pick. I mean, because he's just got like the a typical kind of NBA frame, and he's got the great talent, and you'll see him make these kind of like NBA level plays. But then you'll also see him make just total bonehead plays, because he's a dumb freshman, and just really rough around the edges. So he's a great player, but he's not. I don't trust him. I don't trust this team, and that's one of the reasons why I probably won't be having FSU going too far, because you just cannot trust him. You cannot trust him. I think another really good example was, they were smoking North Carolina, a couple weeks ago. And then North Carolina, you went into halftime, had a little bit of a spurt, and Roy Williams flipped the game script on FSU. FSU could not adjust, and North Carolina just steamrolled them from there on out. They were down by 20, and they ended up, winning by close to 10 points. So,
wow.
I think it ended up actually being closer just due to some silliness at the end. But North Carolina definitively won that game when FSU, in fact, should have definitively just taken care of business and won that game.
Well, one thing I'll say then real quick then, it sounds like, is when a team like FSU is, let's say they're the most talented team in college basketball, for instance, as far as like NBA talent, is, well, maybe they have too much. Like there's a level of like, who are your role players? Like if you remember like North Carolina, like they're good every year type kind of, even this year, they're actually surprisingly becoming pretty good, is they never, how many star NBA players do they ever really have, right? Like they have good college players and they have good complementary pieces, and they build teams that can win championships. FSU builds players that can get into the NBA. There's a lot of like, it sounds like the discipline in part comes from these guys know they're out. It's a little bit like the Kentucky problem, but with a worse coach. Is think about it. Do they really give a shit if they win the championship? Like really, half of them? How many are getting drafted? How many, they don't care. They don't really care. So I think you're right. I think I've kind of now convinced myself off of who can really drive this ship.
But the one thing that I will say again is in a crazy year when, a lot of teams can be affected by a whole host of like different unique factors, again, like a lack of playing time, all playing in the same location, still getting used to playing with one another, maybe a lack of chemistry, and just COVID just in itself. FSU has the pieces to be awesome. And it's just, again, is the discipline factor, is that something that can be fixed for a couple weeks? Can they have level heads and play, disciplined basketball? If they can, then this team they might be the most talented team in all of college basketball, in fact. I think that they have way more talent than I think the Gonzaga.
One thing to point
Um,
out too, then, as far as their totals, I mean, they're 14-6 to the over.
oh yeah, I mean, look at
And
this total
it's
delta
huge.
versus opponent rank.
I
I
mean,
mean, it's
it's
just
huge.
when they play a good team, it's all over.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's huge. So obviously, there's no point in playing any under with FSU in this tournament.
And I think when you look at the spread insights, what this is really good at is telling you is there is no signal here. I mean, they're all over the place. I mean, you can even see the market expectations versus their actual margin of victory. I mean, it's up, it's down. I mean, the market can't even keep up with them. Soon as they think they're going one way, it zigzags the other way, and by a wide margin.
Speaks to the inconsistency of the team, the discipline, because you don't
Exactly.
know what you're going to get on a given night.
Yeah. But yeah, from the totals perspective, again, they're good at shooting threes. They're good at shooting free throws. Again, they have a lot of players, so even when they do get in foul trouble, they have a sufficient amount of players that can continue to keep scoring. They do tend to play, closer games. So even if the game's not completely within reach, it's kind of like in that gray zone where they kind of just keep fouling and points just kind of keep piling up, even though the game is like clearly decided. FSU finds themselves in a lot of those types of games. And I think that's one of like the major reasons why we see these totals going over. In fact, I made that bet in the Georgia Tech game. So if you go back and kind of look at the game, the game stream or the game flow of that game, the game started off super slow. I mean, they both almost didn't even score 30 points by halftime. And nonetheless, the game still went over. It went over 150. Because the second half, there was just, again, the teams got more in rhythm. FSU did start to end up scoring. And then at the end, a good 15 points was scored just by, last second shots, then a foul, another shot, another foul, and kind of this back and forth.
To your point, you're definitely going to get that in March Madness. Like teams don't want to quit. A lot of them, it's their last game. Coaches know that, so you're not going to get the there's 45 seconds left. Like, don't foul them. Like, no.
Yeah.
Even if they're down 16, foul them, shoot.
Well, and hey, and there is precedent for that. If you remember a few years ago, the Northern Iowa Texas A&M game, I think Texas A&M was down double digits with 45 seconds left.
Yeah. 11.
And so I definitely encourage anyone who's listening, go and take a look at that YouTube video of the final 1 minute of Northern Iowa versus Texas A&M. This was like maybe 3 or maybe 4 years ago. And hey, they kept fouling, and it worked out for them because Northern Iowa either kept missing the free throws or then turned the ball over, couldn't inbound the ball, and then they kept making it threes. And
I think they had 3 turnovers in that 45-second stretch.
Yeah. Crazy. So I mean, there is a precedent for that, and again, that continues to drive the bias to the over. That's why it is totally super dangerous betting unders. And then you look at these charts for FSU, and you say, I mean. What kind of value do you need to bet FSU under? I mean, 25 points?
Yeah, I mean,
that might not be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I would say based on this, I'm seeing if you get over 15, 16, then...
No, you're not safe. You basically need to be over 20. You need to be over 20.
Yeah, in theory. I might take
I mean, you can look at it, the total delta. You need to be over 20.
Yeah. Or 20. I think 20 is safe.
To be safe, you need more than 20 points of value to be safe. To bet the under specifically.
Yep. It's a lot. It's a lot of points.
Yeah.
So
even then, you're still not technically safe.
Yeah, no, not with a team like FSU. So the team they play in that first round, though, is UNC. Is there anything we can pull from them to give us any insight? Let's see.
This is the game. This is a team that I still need to watch some tape on for sure.
They are also pretty big. I mean, they have a 7-footer. But I think that's just like one player. I think overall they're not that big actually.
It looks like they're middle of the pack from a height perspective.
Let's see. Effective field goal, they're below average. They don't score effectively. Oh, dear God. 3-point percentage, 30%. Free throw percentage is bad. I mean, they don't really seem like they got a whole lot going for them. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think this team they have a player called Isaiah Miller. He's kind of like their only kind of pure scorer, and
and he's the 6-foot point guard, right? Is that the guy?
Yeah, and he's miserable at free throws. I mean, oh my gosh!
As a point guard,
he looks like
bad.
Yes, yeah. He looks like Shaq shooting a three. I mean, it's like a dead ball brick. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think FSU will probably take care of this then, just because there is a level of when Virginia has a 1 seed loss. Virginia was not the most talented team by a big margin in the college bracket. FSU's like at least top 3. It's so hard for that type of team to lose, and they have so much depth. It's I don't. Yeah.
And I'm looking at Tulsa like Isaiah Miller. They're clearly their best player. Again, he's not even just he's not a good shooter. So this is a dude that likes to drive to the basket, etc. I mean, he shoots 20% from 3
against
60%.
Against the average height of a 6'8.5" FSU player.
Exactly. Yeah, and Cooper Kiba, who is 7 foot plus.
He's not. Yeah,
he shoots 60% from free throw. So even if he's driving to the hoop and gets fouled, he's not even going to be able to convert.
No.
And he is literally their go-to scorer. So he averages like 20 points a game.
Yeah.
Nobody else even averages more than 10 points.
He can't shoot, and he's going up against a bunch of trees. That's not going to work out well. It just can't. Unless he starts making threes, but apparently he can't do that.
No, unless he has a career game. I mean, again, this is like 10-on-1 because again, Florida State has 7, 8 dudes who can replicate what Isaiah Miller does.
Yep, that's a good point. Yep. So I don't think we need to talk too much more about that. I think obviously it's FSU and over or bust in that type of scenario, one way or the other. Let's go to BYU. I like BYU, but man, they are in the worst region, so I don't like them anymore.
Yeah, super unfortunate. Super unfortunate.
But this happens every year. I mean, and this is why it's good in general to like for next year's purposes too, is don't fall in love with teams in advance of seeing the matchups they may have to take. Like know their strengths, know their weaknesses. And that's why we like this general team book is like, I want to know who the teams are, and then let's apply it to the matchups. Like, if you're matched up poorly, like, well, you're a one and done. I mean, Auburn went to the championship game, almost won it that year, but that first round matchup, they played one of the toughest, 14 seeds possible, and like should have lost straight up. But yeah, BYU, obviously they had that nice 54 burger in the first half versus Gonzaga a week and a half ago, or whatever it was. Obviously faded down the stretch. They don't have athleticism, if that's a good way to put it. They have good rhythm. They can score efficiently. They can rebound. They have Haas from Purdue, but he's not athletic. He's just tall.
No, definitely not athletic.
So, it's just I like them in the right spots, but if they play Michigan State, they might be, one and done. As much as I want to back them.
Well, yeah, especially if they run into a team like Michigan State. That's going to be super tough.
I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State handles UCLA if this line comes out and Michigan State is even a slight favorite. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
No, absolutely not. Now again, BYU, if UCLA squeaks it out and they play BYU, that's a great matchup. But again, then BYU's got to face Texas. I mean, it's super tough. And then even if you get past that, then you'd either have to play like UConn or Maryland or Alabama. I mean, it sucks. It's super tough for them to get out of this. I thought there was like some. Now again, like they got the right pieces. That I mean, it's definitely tough. You have to have a lot of upsets.
But I will say this. This is a year where like a team like BYU as a seed could win a few games, get to the Elite Eight type thing. But this team in and of itself lost some of their best like I love BYU last year. I mean they lost
Yeah.
some key players from last year, so it's not the same. Like they have some of the same players, they're still pretty good, but it's a totally different makeup and they're just not as consistent, not as strong. They're actually probably gonna be better next year, I think, than this year. So, there's no point in this bracket to really back them in very far. As far as their
Hmm.
individual chart, though, just to see if there's anything we pick up on. Um, let's see. As far as covering, the 14 ATS versus 8 losses, pretty impressive there. I mean, they cover a lot of teams versus the top 100. They've done a pretty good job this season. Um, yeah, when they're
Not a ton of insights.
when they're underdogs, they don't lose the spread. That's interesting. So if they are an underdog at some point in the tourney, maybe they
Yeah,
are a
that's
play
that
on.
is actually, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so yeah, you look at them being an underdog, they're either right there on the spread or above it. Obviously have not been an underdog many times. Um, but when they are, yeah, they outperform expectation.
Actually, you could even say up to about what a 2-point favorite. You got what 8
Yeah,
games?
actually, yeah, you're true. You're
Pretty
true.
pretty close. So we'll
I could say
see.
you could probably say up to about a 5-point favorite.
And 2, not
Looks
8
like
and
they're
2.
about 10-2.
Yeah, even 6, 7. Yeah, interesting. It's really when
Yeah,
they.
it's once they're a heavy favorite, which they're really not ever going to be in this tournament.
I don't think no, not in this bracket. No,
Definitely.
unless they play UC. I think UCLA they could get it to maybe 6, but we'll see if that happens.
No way.
Yeah, I'm being optimistic. Probably 3.5, 4. Total insights, anything there? They trend pretty close to the line on the under, so they're definitely not going to have a big unexpected like way underperformance besides an outlier.
Hmm.
So that's interesting. So if you get BYU, if the total goes down below maybe 12, seems like
Hmm.
that could be a buy upwards to the over.
Let's move on to Michigan State because there's a lot here. So Michigan State, obviously a play-in team, but I mean there's a lot to like here. And I started kind of pounding the table on Michigan State, uh, 4 or 5 weeks ago, when they really started to turn, because this team has just great talent, a lot of returning talent. Also, like a lot of the key pieces from last year. The thing is they're missing the most important piece, Cassius Winston, who was their senior point guard, been on the team for as long as you can really, remember, like last 4 or 5 years, in fact, and was a primary cog within kind of just the broader leadership, greasing the wheels, making sure the ball is moving correctly, kind of bringing the guys together when they're facing adversity. And now he's gone. And the replacement is Rocket Watts, who was a freshman last year who played just, kind of like the latter half of the season. And he's been like, he just has not performed on the big stage. Like there was no expectations for him last year. He played really well. He's got a lot of expectations for him this year, and he just has not played well, especially and definitely has not served the same role as someone like Cassius Winston. The team has lacked discipline. Also just the commentary from the coaching staff was very negative early on, and we kind of saw this from a lot of like the major brand teams like Duke and Kentucky and things of this sort, talking about how, well, we shouldn't even be playing in COVID, blah blah, and making up all these excuses around essentially why their team sucks. And Michigan State started off terrible, and really rallied near the end. Again, as that kind of talent started to coalesce. This is a team that has the talent, and this is kind of seems like another theme that we kind of been talking about several teams now. They have the talent to go far.
Hmm.
It's just again, they lack kind of the leadership to really push it forward. They lack the consistency. They lack the ability to kind of overcome adversity. But if everything kind of lines right for them, this is now, like, what are they, an 11 seed? This is an 11 seed that can go to the Final Four.
Bold statement. And I think you're right, because so obviously they have the talent. Obviously they have a world-class coach. And they're trending in the right direction, right? They started the year pretty bad, figured themselves out. Remember, I mean, like you said, I mean, coaches like Tom Izzo, like Krzyzewski, like Calipari, like there was a moment in time when they did not think a season was going to happen. So what does that mean? They're not preparing. They're not getting their players ready. And a lot of it's like younger talent. Like they're not really getting what they would normally do to get engaged for the season. So by the time they even got engaged, the season started, we're 10 games in, oh shit, we're making excuses, oh crap, now let's figure it out. And that's where they're at. They're 10 games past a preseason, more or less, right? So like we don't even know how good Michigan State could be if this was a normal season. So to your point, if the market's fading them, which is why I really think I got to do a little more research on UCLA, but I think I really like Michigan State versus UCLA. I mean, it's a toss up. I mean, I know the market's going to like Michigan State too, but at a pick 'em, I don't understand how it's a pick 'em. That doesn't make much sense to me.
No, especially again, this is Michigan State coming from the best conference, and UCLA coming from one of the weaker conferences. And again, Michigan State, the only team to beat 3 top 5 teams. Again, they beat Michigan just recently, just right there down the stretch. Beat Ohio State, beat Illinois. I mean, these are the teams that a lot of people are thinking can go super deep in the tournament. And this is not like, oh well, Michigan State beat them way early on in November. No, they sucked in November. In fact, they're beating these teams in January and February and March. That's when you want to bet on. That's good. That's what you want to see. And that's the only reason they've really snuck into the tournament. That's why it's hard to actually assess this team by looking at the stats. Because again, the first half of the season, they were bad.
You got to throw it out. You almost got to throw it out, actually. I mean, like I said, I think with those type of teams, like I think North Carolina is another one, is those Roy Williams type coaches, they did not think a season was going to happen. So like they're just the first 10 games like don't matter. They thought it was going to be canceled, or like it's just completely, you just got to throw them out. So I mean, Michigan State, the last month and a half of the season, are they an 11 seed or are they a 5 seed? Which direction are we headed? So, to your point, seems like Michigan State's definitely a potential bet-on team. As far as UCLA, then, this first game.
Yeah, the only thing I would say quickly about UCLA, I mean, they got Johnny Uzang from Kentucky, transfer from last year. I mean, I didn't really like Johnny Uzang last year on Kentucky. They were saying like, oh, he might transfer and stuff like that. I was like, good, because this guy, like, he was just always a liability for Kentucky last year. And he's now transferred to UCLA, and he is UCLA's best player. So, I mean, again, like, if he was on Kentucky this year, he probably actually would have been one of their better players, because they underperformed so much. But yeah, I haven't watched a ton of UCLA either. So it's definitely a team I want to get a little bit more under my belt again here the next 48 hours, as I really, really start to dig into some of the tape on some of these teams that I didn't really watch a lot of over the course of the season. I mean, again, Michigan State, again, they got some of those kind of just the inexperience kind of weakness from a leadership perspective. And maybe, again, a lack of resiliency under pressure. So again, of course, UCLA can come out hot and, maybe and win this game. But, if Michigan State can just get hot, I think, they can definitely go far. Whereas UCLA, if they win this game, then I think it sets up great for BYU. Like we were saying, UCLA is not going to go far. They don't have the pieces. There's really nothing to love. Nothing really eye opening. I don't think it's really worth spending a lot of time even thinking about UCLA too much.
Yeah. Just want to see quickly on the totals, anything that stands out. Not really. It pretty much lives in the 130, 140 range and then deviates from there. If it's over 140, looks like it heads over. That's small sample
Man, it looks
size.
like this team, they don't take a lot of threes. They're a good rebounding team. They don't turn the ball over. So it looks like, they have a decent amount of discipline. Very slow tempo, 332. Michigan State is also not going to try and push the ball. So let's look at their totals signals. Let's see what that looks like, because this seems like a game that could trend under.
Oh, Michigan State has a ton of unders, 17 unders to 10 overs. So you're definitely looks like the unders the play here. So we go back to UCLA. Oh, they lean
I'm gonna
over.
take a look at the line. Take a look at the charts. You tell me what would be a good price for you to bet this, and I'm gonna look up the actual number right
now. I don't know the line. So UCLA's range, they live in the 130 to 140, so the line's definitely in that range. It's pretty evenly split with UCLA. It's really like either over, probably in the 135 range for UCLA. Go to Michigan State, they trend a little higher than that. A lot of unders from that. So it's not going to be 140. It's going to be on the lower end. I would say probably like 134 and a half, maybe 136 in that.
135 and a half.
Right there.
So dead on.
Yeah.
So basically saying there's not a lot of value right now.
No, but definitely I think if this bumps up live to 140, 145, hitting the under is the way to go. Because like I said, I mean, it's split deviation with UCLA to the over to the under in that range, whereas Michigan State's heavily on the under. So if I can get it to 145 or something, definitely gonna lean the under on that, especially with the pace, and I think that plays in the favor of the under anyways in the long term. Cool, sounds good. Let's move on to Texas and see another team. I mean, Texas can win this region. I mean, how many teams can win this region?
Yeah,
6.
Yeah, they can definitely
7?
win this region.
So,
ton of experience. One of the most experienced teams in the whole tournament.
Great passers. I will say though, I watched a little bit of Texas in the beginning of the season and then the end of the season. I feel like this team can be beat by a team that can efficiently shoot threes, as far as just being scrappy team shooting threes and being hot. I don't know, Texas can get streaky at times. Excuse me. So to me, Texas is matchup dependent.
No, they're super streaky, and that's one of the reasons why they have, if they're down, they start off cold. They're definitely a really good team to bet on the comeback.
I see. Yeah. I mean, they shoot a ton of threes. 42% of threes. I think they live inside and then out. They try to break inside with their bigs and pump it around to see if they can get an open three. Only 36% accuracy. Yeah,
one of the things that we've talked about that a lot of teams lack, that Texas actually has, is resiliency. Texas has resiliency, and it goes to exactly what we just talked about. We can connect the dot here quite seamlessly. Is it goes to their experience. I mean, this is one of the most experienced teams, one of the most senior-led veteran teams in the whole tournament, and that is why they have resiliency. They don't get rattled. Yeah. So this team can be down 10, and they're going to put their heads down and continue to grind away and eat away at that lead.
I like that. And if we go to the charts, let's see if it's backed up through the season. Yeah, I mean, their variance to the downside, is 10 points. So I mean, when they don't cover, it's by 10 or less, whatever the number is. I mean, that's pretty. I mean, obviously there's an outlier here or there, but more or less, it's about 10. And they hug the line, man. I mean, it's really whatever the line is, they seem to. That's Vegas is pretty spot on within 5 to either direction.
Mm-hmm,
Now,
mm-hmm.
obviously, the volatility standard
You got some
deviation.
outliers there, but you
Yeah,
can kind
yeah,
of discount those.
yeah. So which makes me think whatever the line is, don't bet it. Get it live and
Mm-hmm. What I think
get the
is
value.
interesting, actually, if you look at the bottom left here, the total delta versus expected total. See, this is an
Yep.
interesting trend here. Is basically as the total gets bigger, so as the expectation for the game to be high scoring increases, in fact, their outperformance increases. So the
Mm.
correlation's 1-to-1 there actually. And so as some people maybe get turned off as the total kind of is like, oh man, this opening total is just, it's too high.
Yeah.
In fact, that is when you want to buy them. In fact, then it looks like, the lower it is, the less likely they are to meet those expectations.
There's a lineup on that. Do we have a line on Texas? I gotta pull up my book.
Let's see. What would you say?
On the total?
Yeah.
It's definitely over. It's probably over 140. Let me see. Wait, no, sorry, wrong side. Let me look at Yubaline Christian. Yeah, they live in the 135 to 140-ish range. Yeah, so it's probably what? Probably about 142-ish.
141.
Yeah, and if you go to Abilene Christian, ironically, when the total is 130 to 137, it trends up. It goes over that. When it's 140, it starts getting more split. So it's really split in two. So there's really no edge from Abilene's perspective. But as you said with Texas, as it ascends beyond 140, you're getting that trend up. So it seems like the best play is really find the over.
Mm-hmm. What I think is interesting here from the Abilene Christian perspective is if they go under, they go meaningfully under.
That's a good point. Which probably
so it's like if the team is looking slow, then it looks like that's going to be a full game sort of.
Yeah, that's a good
trend.
point. That's a good point. So let's see their stats and see what kind of damage can they do to Texas, if any. They score 76 points a game. That's pretty decent. 53%. They shoot the ball well. They pass the ball well. That's interesting. Their tempo is 100 ranked. That's not terrible.
No, but look at that strength of schedule. Ugly.
Yeah, I haven't played
very
anybody.
hard to assess anything when you play that sort of competition. And in fact, actually, I love it. Some of our custom signals here kind of spits out exactly, again, another quantitative reading based on a qualitative observation. I was just saying, if this team starts off slow, it basically looks like from these charts that's going to a trend that's going to continue. They're not going to revert out of that. And we'll look at the comeback potential, 53. So this is the type of team that, again, is looking at that as if they're going to be slow, if they get behind, like they're not coming back. Like if they don't got it, they don't got it for the game.
So that makes like your margin is you don't want the over.
No.
Not from Abeline's perspective.
No.
Never mind. I rescind that offer. So in honesty, I think what you want,
unless they're going to have a good game.
Yeah, but I mean that's gonna be tough billing. I feel like versus Texas, but you are right. But my guess is,
the thing is they got height. I mean, look at they're a top 10 team in the field from a height perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Look at their aggressiveness scores. Also, I mean, the team is slightly aggressive. The custom experience also. I mean, it's in the upper echelons of the field. So I mean, it's all kind of positive there. They struggle at free throws. But they're good at rebounding.
The 3%.
They got really good three-point percentage.
Now I'm torn. Now I don't know what to think anymore. Um, yeah,
They're efficient.
I guess this is a good game to go in with pivot A and pivot B. So if we're seeing Abilene being able to keep pace with Texas, be able to find good shots, score the ball type stuff, you might get a situation where this heads to Texas line of over
Mm-hmm.
142 with ease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Whereas,
what I would say is what we're looking at here is like if Abilene Christian starts off hot and plays well, and Texas is playing well, this is not a position where you'd see, oh, the live total moved up 10 points. I'm going to take the under. Like that, this does not set up well for that.
yeah,
This basically looks like a type of kind of matchup that you don't want to fight the trend
yep,
in this type of game.
that's a great point, actually. That's a great way to put it. If it's going to the moon, as they say these days, don't fuck with it. Don't go against it.
Is that a saying?
I don't know. Just the going to the moon thing, I guess, is a thing now. If you're confident about something, you say it's going to the moon because
Is this
farthest you
like
can go.
the boomer like
Oh no, this is Z or millennials.
definitions? When the kids say going to the moon, it means
I'm an old man now,
it's
and
good.
we're going to the moon. I tell you. All right, next up we got UConn. 2 more games. Get through these quickly ish. UConn, a team that we are very high on in general in the toughest bracket, of course, mother effers. But I mean, they have a lot of returning scoring.
One last thing I just want
Yep.
to say about Abilene Christian that I see again from this new page that we have in our most updated version of the book. Again, that talks about depth, distribution of scoring, number of sharpshooters. Abilene Christian has 6 players that shoot 35% or better from 3. And they're super deep.
Dang.
They run 10 players, play 10 or more minutes.
I mean, strictly from a trend matchup standpoint, seems like Abilene Christian matches up with Texas better than people probably think.
Well, what I'm saying, what I also am seeing here is basically in all these sorts of kind of matchups with kind of a no-name school, this looks like one of the better matchups. Like we were talking about Florida State, UNC Greensboro. It was like hard to kind of materialize any sort of kind of underdog kind of victory scenario.
Yep.
This one looks like, as much as we love Texas, I mean, it's hard to just dismiss what we're seeing from Abilene Christian.
They're 23-4. I mean, they're 17-6 ATS. So I mean, they have their blood to dominate games and to win convincingly and take care of business. And as underdogs against top 50 teams, I mean, they covered one with ease and another one they almost covered.
Mm-hmm. Again, the biggest kind of asterisk there is just the competition. So basically, this team has smoked their shitty competition. The average,
but I mean, they're not going to beat. I mean, they're not going to beat the best competition, but it seems like they're capable of doing it. Whereas UNCG versus FSU, it doesn't.
No, yeah, I mean, at least
feasible.
they smoke the teams they need to.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I definitely wanted to get a little more insight into Abilene because I think again, we are in the bracket, and this is the thing about if you want to pick upsets, in my opinion, for bracket's sake, is if it's a wide open bracket, you might as well fade some teams early because even if you're wrong, they might lose the next game, right? So like,
well, you can also look at too kind of our market outlook on Abilene. I guess I surprised myself here, but we have cautious buy, projected upside Sweet 16. So there's things that in here that's worth liking.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to UConn. We like them. They fared well in their tourney. They lost They lost to Creighton, and then Creighton lost to Georgetown. Is that how it happened?
Yep.
I think it was a close game.
I mean, that was just like a two-faced scenario of what Creighton is they have good games, they have bad games.
Yeah. Well, they live and die by the 3 more or less.
Yeah.
But as far as UConn,
and they just barely beat UConn.
I will say, I mean, like, UConn's a very strong defensive team. It's kind of their MO. Their average at 3-point, average at effective field goals. So their offense is not is not stellar.
No, but the
That's
other thing is also their best player, Book Knight, missed 4 or 5 games, and when he plays, they're 14-3.
that's a good point.
So I think that's something a lot of people are also kind of underestimating. We're also, we see that they have one of the biggest discrepancies between Vegas expectations and the way they've been seeded. And so essentially as a proxy, kind of the public perception of them. So, I mean, they're a top 10 team according to Vegas.
Yeah, that's so
They have the 9th best odds to win the championship. And that's from our assessment, the toughest region there is.
yeah.
But then
again, the good thing about the quote unquote toughest region, to a degree, if you're a lower seed, means there's more parity, which means you may actually get a lesser team, so to speak, in a round than like when the one's gonna have to play the 4 and gonna have to play the 2. Like you may get like, oh, I got to play a 7 and a 10 and a 13. So it can be to the advantage of teams in that bracket. Basically, kind of like when Virginia lost the 16 seed and it was wide open and Kentucky lost, and who won that year, that bracket? Freaking Loyola. How? Oh, because they all went down. They actually ended up having a pretty easy pathway compared to what it could have been.
One of the things I'm noticing here is UConn's actually lost 3 times to Creighton this year.
Achilles heel.
So
that's a kryptonite then.
That is, it looks like an Achilles heel. So yeah, if they're matched up versus a team that kind of is similar to Creighton, watch out.
Maryland shoots a lot of threes, but they don't make as many as Creighton, 35%. So they're at the league average.
No, this is a super tough round 1 game. Super tough.
Yeah.
Maryland. This is going to be an exciting one, I think.
Yeah.
Because Maryland, they look like, this is so far in all the teams we've assessed, this is the team that's like the biggest kind of helter-skelter. I watched Maryland and be like, wow, this team's good. And then other games like, man, this team's bad. Nobody can score.
Well, if you go to their charts, I think that'll be demonstrated. There's a lot of.
Well, I think they actually have
they're all over the map.
One of the worst wins.
Yeah, they're 12 and 16 ATS, so there's a lot more hype behind them than maybe is deserved. And if you look at their cover delta versus opponent rank, if they play a top 15 team, it's like just get demolished. So I don't know. I don't think you can trust Maryland. They're all over the map. It's terrible how
they definitely all are all over the map.
But they seem to fare well versus a specific type of competition. So the question I think becomes, is Maryland a Creighton comp or are they not? And I think if you can answer that question, you'll know who to back in this game.
Well, they're not conviction. Because
that's what I was thinking too.
Because Maryland, first of all, can be much better than Creighton, or they can actually be worse than Creighton. They lost by 20 to Clemson. They lost by 15 to Rutgers. But then they go and beat Illinois. And then they beat Purdue.
Yeah, Purdue. It was Schmerdue.
And beat Michigan State twice. And then lose to Northwestern. They're all over the map.
Yeah, they're like maybe like the LSU of the Big Ten. So Big Ten style.
Yeah, but not nearly the same sort of kind of
explosive
upset.
The Big Ten. Yeah, I guess you're right. They're not going to make the Final Four. And their totals are all over the map too. If you look at this expected total versus actual total.
Yeah. Well, because that's what I was saying was this team, it's like, wow, they're so good, or man, no one can score. So it's like they go on these like long droughts and like basically can't score points. And then other times, like 6 dudes are hitting threes.
Interesting. Yeah. And so playing a team like Connecticut with a sound defense, I mean, you're not going to get Maryland to dominate this game. Like, I don't think that's in the cards. So I mean, it's really game script wise, it's going to be at worst a tight game, with a lean towards UConn pulling away. So it seems so far. I mean, what you're not going to get? I mean, UConn's defense is just going to not show up all of a sudden. That seems unlikely.
The thing is I'm reading like articles on ESPN and stuff. Like they're already having matchup commentary on how Maryland faces Alabama. So they're like already writing off UConn.
That sounds dumb because.
Well, I think also Maryland's going to be one of the most popular, especially for your brackets.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to pick this 10 seed to be the 7 seed.
And it's a big name. And if you look at, and actually the numbers tell us this, because if you look at the ATS, the market has been overbuying this team the entire season.
Yeah, beautiful.
So
beautiful observation.
All in, Connecticut, bankroll. We quit. Good night. Don't listen to that. That was a joke. That was comedy for those listening. Alabama.
Especially after they lose.
Yeah. Shit. Get back on YouTube. We got to get all back. No. Alabama, last game up versus Iona. Ooh. So this is the thing. I think Alabama is extremely volatile and can
extremely what?
Volatile and can definitely lose this game. So if there's the biggest upset possible, I think, is this game. I don't know. That's my as far as the first.
I mean, I can't ever say with conviction, no, not this season.
So tell me why. Tell me why I'm wrong, and Alabama's going to run away with it. They're up 16-point favorites.
I watched a lot of Alabama. I haven't watched a ton of Iona.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely Iona's going to be one of those teams that I need to watch some game tape on the next 2 days. But it's just the main talking points: Rick Pitino. Everyone's just talking about Rick Pitino when it comes to Iona, not the actual team.
Yeah, that's a good point.
and Alabama is one of the hottest teams in college basketball right now, and they got such great chemistry. They pass the ball so well. They're like one of the teams that I feel like just like has like some of the most fun playing. They're super just enjoyable to watch from an entertainment perspective. They got,
Nick Saban's their coach.
Yeah.
Transition to basketball.
Yeah. No, and again, I think they're really excited too, because Nato, it's the head coach. So they got one of the best incoming freshmen already committed to Alabama for next year. So just like a lot of momentum behind this program, a lot of optimism. And I think that can continue to kind of like just feed into the broader narrative this year. I mean, they won the SEC from a regular season perspective, won it in the tournament. And again, remember, that's something that we did not see very often this year, is someone be able to do both.
Point.
So I think there's a lot to like about Bama. They're definitely another team, again, to your point, very volatile. So if they are down at any point or looking sluggish, I mean, they can flip that script fast.
Well, they definitely don't. They definitely don't lose by margin. So as far as the spread's concerned, so it's definitely, you're more likely to see Alabama get a few blowouts than to see Alabama get blown out.
Yeah.
So if you can get Alabama down in a situation, start sluggish, blah blah blah, especially in this tough bracket, I mean, could be a definitely buy-on opportunity.
Yeah. The one thing I would say is, and this is another macro kind of view that we need to make sure we keep in our mind's eye. And one of the things that kind of starts to become a realization, maybe when it's a little bit too late when we're betting always, is when you start to see these conferences start playing each other and we're like, wow, maybe the ACC like isn't that good, in past years,
That's true.
or like, oh man, like maybe like literally every SEC team is overrated or something like of that sort,
Yeah.
And so, this is like a good barometer game. So like if Alabama kind of struggles versus Iona, it's like kind of like too close for comfort. That's not a good sign. It's not a good sign.
I mean, and they're 16-point favorites, so if they do struggle and they underperform, and that's definitely a big. The market was way wrong about the best team in the SEC, which then maybe means the SEC is overrated.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I doubt the SEC is overrated because like they're just
Well, they have a lot of talent.
Everyone thinks they suck anyway.
But, I mean, if you actually think about it,
if they are overrated, then they're in real trouble.
Well, there's almost always an SEC team or teams that like make it farther than most people thought they were ever going to.
Like, usually, for the last several years, the SEC like does not get a lot of credit.
No, like when South Carolina beat Duke and was not our finest hour. But so Iona, besides Rick Pitino, is there anything? So their returning scores are only 28%. So it's obviously a new team. So
yeah.
I mean, this team has
which makes sense, having a new coach and him wanting his own players.
They've only played 17 games. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm trying to be bold, but like, it's gonna super tall order for Rick Pitino to have his team rolling against a team that's rolling. Like, if this was a team that was struggling right now or injured, like, actually, I think Iona would have a better chance versus like a Michigan because of the new blood in the mix. But if Alabama's rolling, and that's a tall order, man. Like, you're not going to be lucky to kind of cover this game. And
I think it'll be probably good experience. It looks like, they're a very young team. Again, new head coach, he's still kind of implementing his kind of philosophies and approaches to games. And I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe Iona hangs in there, kind of like has a lot of enthusiasm. Maybe a little bit of a hangover for Alabama after a long SEC tournament, a lot of, exerted energy in that championship game versus LSU.
Yeah. And we've seen those kind of 2 versus 15 games where it's like super close and like whatever, but like the 2 seed finds a way to win it. You could see that here, I think. And so that's why if you got Bama like, they're down 16 to 7, like might be an opportunity there.
Yeah, hard to imagine that happening, but I mean, I think like if this is tied at halftime, I think that's another like really good opportunity to bet them.
Interesting. The line hugging Alabama heavily, sort that. But okay, sounds good. I think we're done for tonight, but we'll be back tomorrow with the South and Midwest. We're gonna try to tackle both, so we'll obviously a little quicker to kind of get through them all. And get an updated V3 version of the of our lookbook for March Madness up by tomorrow night, end of night. Look out for that. And thank you for tuning in. Any last words, Brett?
No, the last thing I would just say, close on Alabama is, Alabama is kind of the same things that I've talked about LSU. I think LSU maybe has a little bit more like raw talent, but Alabama is, I think, essentially a more consistent version of LSU, with maybe just an ever so slightly less kind of upside from an explosively offensive performance, but it's still very explosive. Alabama could definitely win this region. In fact, they'd probably be, maybe my favorite or maybe my second favorite pick to win this region.
I dig it. You've brought the light to me with Alabama in this region. And I appreciate it. And so we'll see everyone tomorrow night. And have a good one. Thanks.
Good night.